So what exactly is the student spirit? Well, it's the part of us that's forever curious. A mindset where anything is possible. Tries new things. Keeps you sharp between the ears. And pays just a little more attention. It isn't afraid to make a statement. Changes the world, one step at a time. And squeezes our egos, insecurities, and fears into tiny little metaphorical balls before crushing them. The curious don't just think, they do. Stay curious.
We've got to come to grips first with what is classicism, and secondly, we've got to understand what constitutes the so-called classical style. First, a premise, please. Music as a mirror. Since the High Middle Ages, and now I'm talking, about around 1100 or so, music in the West, and what I mean by that is in the European sphere, has been a mirror of the social, political, economic, and cultural world about the composer. Composers do not exist in a vacuum, and they do not exist, despite the fact that we often think they do, in an ivory tower. They are subject to the same environmental pressures and realities that the rest of us are subject to. So since the High Middle Ages, Western musical style, that is, the structural language and expressive content of music, has exhibited constant change as the world changes around the composer. And I would note that the speed of this change has accelerated constantly as we move ever closer to the madcap of our present day world. What we today call then the classical style, that smooth, elegant, tasteful, beautiful melody-dominated style, a style exemplified by the music of Haydn, Mozart, and the young Beethoven, what we today call the classical style, evolved as a result of an 18th century social revolution that we call the Enlightenment.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. We are so glad to welcome you as part of our community tonight. Please note that this webinar is being recorded and distributed live stream. By entering this virtual meeting room, you give your consent to be recorded and distributed by the Student Hotel Vienna and other third parties. If you prefer to not be recorded, please turn off your camera and microphone and/or go to the Facebook live video feed, the link to which has been placed in the chat room. For a better experience, please turn off your microphone and set your video to gallery view. Scientists describe today's current moment of unprecedentedly global happiness as the age of Zoom. This present happy moment could occur only because of wise decisions made by our forefathers. Once upon a time, enlightened government officials refused to let Microsoft control the internet and gave that privilege to two more responsible and civic-minded companies called Google and Facebook. On account of their virtuous, family-oriented nature, Google and Facebook would be allowed to harvest all of humanity's data and keep it for us in a safe place, so that future generations of boring scholars may publish scholarly articles about our particular concepts of Saturday night entertainment while including sly gender critiques. It goes without saying that, like all responsible archivists, Google and Facebook will force each of those boring scholars to sign legally binding agreements not to publish any material about non-deceased subjects, their families, or acquaintances. If we look even farther back in human history, to arrive at this moment of true happiness, it is believed that humanity had to live through 5 preparatory ages. Of course, we all know that the first was the Stone Age, and that the Stone Age was followed by the Bronze Age and the Iron Age. Each of those ages of technological innovation brought more and more happiness to their human subjects. But it is the next 2 ages that had a singular impact on my Saturday nights and the Saturday nights of my friends. During that age, my ever-inquisitive father discovered that Professor Robert Greenberg was using this new tape technology to bring university lectures into Western living rooms as a form of Saturday night entertainment. Because we lived in Plattsburgh, New York, we didn't have a lot of entertainment options. We could either talk to each other or silently stare at the John Singer Sargent-like portrait of my grandmother. So, Dr. Bob really rocked our world. Excuse me, I have to begin this again. I lost my train of thought. Each of those ages, of the Bronze Age and the Iron Age, of technological innovation brought more and more happiness to the human subject. But it is the next two ages that are of equal importance, the VHS age and the DVD age. It is the VHS age that had a singular impact on my Saturday night. So Dr. Bob really rocked our world. My friend Aaron would come over expecting to talk about schoolgirls and how they might look if John Singer Sargent painted them, and found himself admiring Dr. Bob's finely pressed shirts.
Little did I know I'd be held captive in listening to these introductions. They did turn out being wonderful, though.
There is our Aaron, those Saturday nights that he was robbed of. So, when it became clear that the telelectures was coming to a head, we always got excited, not because Dr. Bob's bombshell thesis, but because we knew my dad would soon drive us to get ice cream. Our Saturday nights would never be the same again. So who is Dr. Bob? I would read you his bio, but I think that his credo is more accurate. Music, as a universal, nonverbal language, allows us to tap into the social, cultural, and aesthetic traditions of different cultures and historical eras. We become more aware of our shared humanity and the wisdom and vision of others. Music allows us to transcend our own world and partake in utterly different realities. But last, but certainly not least, music is fun to listen to, relatively inexpensive to partake in. We can do it by ourselves or with others, and there are a number of ways to expand our knowledge and appreciation of the art. Music offers us a marvelous manna, an opportunity to experience the sublime, rest, relaxation, metaphor, and mind expansion at the same time. Cheaper than therapy, and when consumed responsibly, safer than scotch. Irresistible. Dr. Bob, welcome. It's so nice to finally be able to speak with you after all of these years of watching you on a VHS tape and DVD.
My pleasure. I'm happy to be here. I didn't know I was supposed to be as happy as you've told me I should be. Although I have to say, there's nothing happy about seeing what I looked like 27 years ago. That singing was very painful to me.
I'm sorry.
I had hair, I had contact lenses, I weighed 30 pounds less, and my knees and shoulders worked. Oh my goodness.
Well, Dr. Bob, we are so glad to have you here tonight. And I want to ask you, so tell us a little bit about you. You're always talking about other composers, other musicians. When I first got to hear your music, I thought, wow, finally I get to know who Dr. Bob is. Tell us, what music experiences do you remember as when you were younger?
I was brought up in a musical household. My father's mother graduated from the New York Institute of Musical Art in 1916. That became the Juilliard School in, there she is, Bessie Hurwitz, the child of immigrants from Belarus. 13 children in that family. Every one of them went to college. And as I say, this New York Institute of Musical Art became the Juilliard School in 1924. And my grandmother tortured generations of piano students in the greater New York City area. My father being one of those that she tortured, me being one of those that she tortured. You played piano. There I am, I don't know, at the age of about 10 or 11 months, probably working on my Rachmaninoff, although with the cluster, that could be Scriabin. And you just made music if you grew up in my house. So it was a natural kind of thing to do. I always wrote music. She used to jot down my first pieces for me. So there was never any question. There I am with my father about 1977. We're doing some four hands work. He was a very good piano player, and only arthritis stopped him from playing. And he played every night when I was growing up. Often dead German and Austrian composers, but even more often than that, the great composers of the American Songbook, Gershwin and Kern and Porter and Berlin. So I've got a kind of, how do I put it, schizophrenic musical background. A lot of jazz, a lot of American music. I'm a Steinway artist as a pianist, as a jazz pianist. But of course, the classics as well. And I've always written music, so there was never any question what I would do with myself when I grew up and went away to school, even though my parents were flabbergasted when I decided to major in music. I still remember my mother saying to me, but you could be a doctor. You could be a lawyer. I said, Mom, why are you acting surprised? I've been taking piano lessons for the last 15 years. So parents are never happy about that kind of statement.
I agree with you completely. But
you know, they support you for your first 20 years, and then when you make the career choice, they say, what did I do wrong? Right? But anyway, so the piece of music you just played was something I wrote about 7 or 8 years ago. It's a quintet, as you can see, a piano quintet, piano and string quartet, called Invasive Species. And you picked a really wonderful, nasty section to play. It's about invasive species, and this is March of the March of the Killer Yellow Ants, something like that. But a climactic moment that, out of context, might sound a little more abrasive than it really is. But it's fun to write music.
So, Dr. Question: are you still friends with these musicians?
Oh yeah. This I only write for my friend. They stay friends.
It's very nice of you to write such challenging things.
The quartet you just saw is a wonderful group called the Alexander String Quartet, and I've known them since the mid-1980s, and I've written 3 string quartets for them. They've recorded them, they've traveled and played them across the world, and I've written this quintet for them. And we've been performing together every season, except this one, for obvious reasons. We've been performing together since the early 90s, all over the place. And, you know, I miss those guys. And yes, they perform my stuff because I'm at an age now where it's all about relationships. It's all about writing for my friends and the love that takes place when you give them that gift, when they shout back at you, how could you do this to us? But sooner or later, the important thing for performers is that once they've invested the time, they get something back that's commensurate with the time. And as a composer, I'd like to think that, yes, I ask you to work hard, but once you've figured it out, you'll like the piece enough And by the way, that's what makes an audience happy. I never worry about an audience. I worry about my players. If the players are happy, the audience is happy. And believe it or not, those were happy players
And
just now.
Well, we'll see when they come on our show and tell us what they really.
Right.
Dr. Bob, so but then you've got a different also. So you've got composition. It's something that you did playing piano, and then you also went into this professorship, teaching everybody kind of all about all this music that you had experienced when you were young man growing up. So let's see if we can we see that one of another excerpt, please.
First, we've got to talk about the piece that shook everybody up, the piece that seemed to take music to a place where no one was prepared for it to go. And we've got to talk about the tradition from which the Third Symphony grew, which was the so-called classical or Viennese classical tradition. By talking about the Third Symphony and understanding it, we then have to look back and understand what drove Beethoven to write such a watershed work. It really is a very new piece of music, a work lost on Beethoven's contemporaries, lost on the critics, lost on his audience, lost even on his fellow musicians. It reflects Beethoven's self-described new path, a path that he's going to stay on for the remainder of his compositional career, and a path that, of course, will become the most influential compositional path in at least European music for the next 100 years. So the questions we must ask ourselves, apropos of Beethoven's Third, and the questions we will ask: what personal, professional, environmental circumstances allow someone the emotional freedom, or imbue someone with the desire, to so break with the aesthetic traditions of their past and indeed their present? It's a good question. Why would Beethoven write a piece that was lost on his contemporaries and then keep writing other pieces that were lost on his contemporaries? Another way to ask the same question, rather more colloquial: where does this guy come off breaking with the style? Who does he think he is? Where does he get the temerity to mess with a style that was good enough for Haydn, good enough for Mozart, and all these other neat, fun cats? Who does he think he is? Well, that's a really good question. So we must answer these questions by looking back in Beethoven's life, examining his childhood, examining the environment around him, examining his hearing disability and his other physical infirmities in order to understand why, in 1803, at the age of 33, he's prepared to basically throw caution to the winds and write music the likes of which no one has heard or could understand before.
Fantastic. So, Dr. Bob, I mean, I got to say, now I understand where this Brooklyn attitude comes from. But so tell me, how is it that you got from such an aficionado, grandmother from the Juilliard School, playing piano, and then you got into this lecturing, through technology? What were the steps? How is it? Tell us, how'd you left Brooklyn, I imagine, and then you went into studying music. Tell us about that.
Serendipity. Our lives take paths we can never predict. I went to school at Princeton, then escaped, having grown up in suburban New Jersey, having been born in Brooklyn, then grown up in suburban New Jersey. For your people who don't know about suburban New Jersey, just think, I don't know, Black Pit of Calcutta. I moved to California as soon as I could. I've been here since 1978. This is where I went to graduate school, got my PhD, decided early on I was never going to leave. And so when I did finish my schooling, I had two options. I could throw my academic box tops into the wind, hope to get a job somewhere, or I could stay put and take whatever work I could find. And I stayed put and took whatever work I could find. I was teaching extension programs at the University of California, Berkeley, at the San Francisco Conservatory. I was teaching in people's living rooms, and slowly I developed a vocabulary for teaching about the repertoire of music to adults who otherwise did not necessarily read music. How do you teach musical form to these people? You have to come up with a vocabulary. How do you teach complex harmonic and motivic issues to such people? You got to come up with a vocabulary that allows them to hear the music. And you also have to start thinking about, why did a composer make the choices he or she made? I mean, as a composer myself, I think that's really interesting. The music doesn't make itself, it's made by people. Why do people make choices? And how are those choices shaped by their environment? And slowly over time, I believe, gave myself another PhD. The first one was in music composition. The second one was in music history. I ended up being a music history professor at the San Francisco Conservatory, running their music history program for many, many years. And that was my stepping stone. To me, composition and music history are two sides of the same coin. It's all about human activity. It's all about how we turn our inspiration and our environment, crystallize it, distill it into sound. And so to me, writing a piece of music is storytelling. To me, speaking about music history, teaching is storytelling. Everything we humans do is storytelling. We're trying to find metaphor and analog in a crazy world and some way of understanding our world through our own experience. And so there you go. And by, again, serendipity, because I was teaching these living room classes in San Francisco with all of these heavy business movers and shakers who I didn't even know were big business movers and shakers, I was profiled in the Wall Street Journal in 1992 as this professor teaching music to lay people. And that led to the teaching company, the Great Courses, which had just gone into business. I was what they were looking for. Again, the recordings we're looking at are from the mid-1990s. It's terrifying to look at those. That last one was the Beethoven symphonies. We recorded that in the summer of 95. And I'm supposed to be in Vienna right now if it wasn't for the pandemic, as we've talked about. I was supposed to arrive in Vienna a couple of days ago, and we're recording a course on Haydn, Mozart, Beethoven, and Schubert in Vienna. And hopefully we'll record that next year. But back to the point, serendipity. My life has taken all those strange paths all our lives take. I have one genuine skill, I will tell you, an inability to say no. And that inability has given me the opportunity to do a whole pile of things I otherwise should never have attempted to do. You know the old line, you fake it till you make it? You're looking at them. So there you go. My life has taken these paths, but I'm very happy with the paths my life took ultimately, because I've been able to work with a lot of great people and speak to a lot of people.
So, Dr. Bob, you say, okay, the Wall Street Journal was writing about you. They took notice of you. Tell us, because I was actually with a colleague of mine, I was trying to explain, we were trying to figure out, what does Dr. Bob do? And so that's why I ask you, okay, you're a pianist, you're a music historian. How is it that you define yourself?
I would like to think I'm primarily a composer, but that's probably a lie in terms of the amount. I only write a piece or two a year now. And to call yourself a composer means that's what you're doing. But as a composer, that's what's given me my skills. That's what allows me to look at a piece of music by Beethoven, for example. And I know this sounds arrogant and conceited, but it allows me to think I understand what he wants us to hear. As a composer, I realize a piece of music it's a diary, it's a storyline, it's a little bit of someone's life. It's a dialogue. And the question is, how do you tap into that dialogue with that composer? And by the way, when you're looking at a piece of music by a neat dead German, that person is as alive as the moment he or she put pencil to paper. So as a composer, I feel this is what's given me access to the meat and potatoes of a piece of music. But how do I describe myself? With a lot of different words, and it all comes out sounding obnoxious. Composer, music historian, author, pianist, father, owner of an awful cat. And we'll stop there. But as you know, and as I'm sure a lot of the people you interview know, if you have a career in the arts, especially in music, you can't do one thing. I mean, you're very, very, very lucky if you can do just one thing. Point is, you got to do a lot of different things, and that all kind of clumps together into one career. And so these are the things I do.
Dr. Bob, we have a very nice note from Aaron. I have to leave, but it's been an honor to hear from you, Doctor. Thank you for bringing such excitement to this discussion. It's amazing to hear from you these many years after watching your VHS lessons. You see?
Thank you, Aaron.
It was time well spent. So Yeah, so I just want to ask you then, just a curiosity, because you talk about telling a story and all this. So the story we heard at the last composition, this was about ants.
Uh, yeah, about an invasive species of ants, exactly. The whole theme of this piece are three invasive species that have really disrupted their environment. These yellow killer ants, so that was March of the Killer Ants. Then there's a movement about water hyacinths, these pretty, pretty beautiful water hyacinths that are just choking off waterways all over the United States. And the last movement is called E. globulus. That's the species name for the blue gum eucalyptus trees that were responsible for what's called the Oakland Hills Fire, the largest urban fire in the history of the United States until just about 3 years ago, which burned a huge area of where I live here in Oakland, and 3,500 homes and a tremendous amount of space was destroyed. And it's because these trees were planted in the late 19th century thinking that they were going to be good lumber trees. Well, it turns out it was a mistake. You can't harvest this eucalyptus. They grow like weeds and they're incredibly inflammatory.
So Dr. Bob, in other words, the story doesn't have to be autobiographical. It doesn't have to be about a person. The story about music, like you're talking about, it can really, it can.
Oh yeah, that piece was that was just a piece of program music, a descriptive piece, and the point of that is that it was just the fire. And I rarely write descriptive music, but it was fun. And I knew I was writing for these wonderful musicians, the Alexander String Quartet and the pianist Roger Woodward. So I was allowed to let myself go, and I did, and they dealt with it.
Well, let's get another piece in here now. This is 180 Shift. Lovely. Wow. So Dr. Bob, so tell us about this piece.
You know, that you chose one of my favorite parts too. That was the end of the second movement of a three-movement piece. The trio, they're brilliant. The name of the trio is Trio 180, and they call themselves that because it's the 3 points of a triangle, 180 degrees. I called my piece 180 Shift, obviously as an honor to them, but also this was an important piece for me, and it's one I had to write. The shift is from the very beginning, which is it's an elegy, the first movement, a variations movement. I lost a beautiful young wife in 2009. Yeah, it was very tragic. The mother of my two younger children passed away at the age of 35 of cancer, just 10 months after my son was born. And this piece was for her. And it begins with an elegy to her, a variations movement that becomes quite violent. Then the second movement is the transitional movement. It's where, through dance, life comes back to my emotional life. And that's the Ravelian section that began the selection you played, is right in the middle of that shake, rattle, and roll, get the body restored. And then the third movement is just a rhythmic blitz through life as I see it. But the 180 shift is the 180 shift between grieving and between coming back to life again. And so, I don't generally talk about these kind of autobiographical things because no one wants to hear them. Does the music work? Does the music not work? But you asked me, and there you go. And that's why it brought out an extra line, a bit of lyricism, of gentleness from me that ordinarily I might not put into a piece of music. I like rough and tumble. I like rock and roll. I'm a jazzer. But that middle movement had to make this transition from dark to light. And it worked. It was hard. It took me a long time to get it right, but it worked. And thank you for playing that section.
Simply beautiful. And I wondered to myself also, because I saw how delicately these lovely women were performing. I wondered, how it felt to you to have these people, these lovely women, talented musicians, playing it with such sensitivity. They must have at least gotten the story, even if you didn't tell them.
Oh, I did tell them, and Sonia Leong, who's playing piano, and Nina Flyer, and Ann Miller, who's playing the violin, and Nina plays the cello. Again, I've known these women for years and worked with them for years, and so writing for them, it's an. I know this sounds so flaky, but it's an act of love. I want to give them a gift, and they want to give it back to me. And I've written a lot for Nina, the cellist, and the pianist Sonia. I mean, she's just. Oh, the world is so filled with these brilliant musicians, and they teach at little schools in the middle of nowhere, and no one's heard of them outside of their community, and yet they play like gods and goddesses. And there you have it. And in the San Francisco Bay Area where I live, we have a concentration of such people. So it's writing for people I know and love, and I know I'm going to get a good performance from such folks.
So coming back to this idea that you're a composer, you're a pianist, and then you're also a historian, you're a lecturer, how do we get a different Dr. Bob when you're working with these musicians on your own compositions than we get when you're speaking about Beethoven's music? Because like you said, it's very uncommon of you to become autobiographical.
One has to tread lightly when dealing with your musicians. It's so easy to get arrogant. It's so easy to get stupid. It's so easy to think that you're more important than you really are. I mean, I'm 66 now. I've learned a lot of lessons from what I might think of as my brash youth. Yes, you have to respect your players. I've seen composers, both young and old, verbally abuse their players or speak in a condescending tone of voice. Excuse me, you don't do that. You just don't do that. I don't care if you're dissatisfied or not. You're working with pros, you got to treat them like pros. So I do not, when I'm teaching, I have very firm ideas about what's right and what's wrong. But as a jazz pianist, I know there's a lot of different ways to play anything. And you have to allow your players a certain degree of leeway to play a piece the way they think they have to play it. When you feel something is wrong, you say so. But for the most part, I treat my players with a lot of respect. I give them as long a rope as they want in interpretation, and I am almost inevitably thrilled by what I get. Every now and then I'm disappointed. But no, I'm very different as a composer. I have to tell you, in all honesty, I'm always so grateful. I'm so damned grateful that top-notch performers are willing to work their derrieres off on one of my pieces, that I feel very little need to interfere with them once that process has begun.
So tell us about your relationship with the other composers then. Like you said, you spent most of, I want to say, yeah, your life, your daily life you spend with those dead German composers you were talking about.
Austrian too, let's not forget, and French, and Italian, Russian.
So tell us, how is it that that's different than when you're writing a composition? What is your relationship like with those people?
I feel like this is family. I know that, again, you're asking, and that's the best way for me to put it. I'm a voracious reader, for what that's worth. I mean, I think the first thing you have to do is know the person as best you can. And since most of these people are dead, sadly, all we have is the literature that's out there. And so I think the first responsibility that I have is to try to understand the people who wrote this music. And it's not just the musicians, it's also visual artists and so forth. I want to understand the individual. I need to understand the time and the environment in which they lived as well. So again, I'm a voracious reader of history. In preparation for this trip that didn't happen to the amazing city of Vienna, I've been there many times before, but this time over the last year, I've done a tremendous amount of reading, historical reading. And I have to get a feel for what it was like in 1896. I have to get a feel for what it was like in 1860, when Emperor Franz Joseph decided to fill in the glacis and knock down the walls and build the Ringstrasse and the whole ring area around there. I have to know what it was like when the Viennese were fighting off Suleiman and the Ottoman Turks. Only once I have a feel, and again, it's a feel for a time and a place and a person, can I feel that I could start talking about an individual's artistic work. It's not enough to look at a piece of music in its own terms. That's, by the way, that's what I was taught, and it's wrong. When I went to school in the 70s, it was called the New Criticism. You never involve any exterior vocabulary or any exterior history. If you're going to look at Beethoven's Third Symphony, you have to simply look at it in its own terms as a series of motivic developments and so forth. Well, that's such a pile of crap. I'm sorry. It's a piece of music, like a piece of art, like a building, is a analog for a larger environment. And we've got to understand that environment, as well as a composer's way of dealing with that environment. So I'm not sure the origin of your question. I yanked my head way out of place here. The bottom line is you have to know a lot before you can start trying to put yourself in the place of the composer. I remember where I was. But I feel for the people I've studied and lived with for the last 40, 50 years of my life, certainly Bach, Haydn, Mozart, Beethoven, Schubert, Schumann, Wagner, Tchaikovsky, Rachmaninoff, who, by the way, I adore, and in academia, he is abused soundly. Liszt, I adore. I feel that Schoenberg, Stravinsky, I feel that I've really gotten to know these people at a fairly intimate level through their art and through their biography. And so that's how I feel about them, extended family.
So, Dr. Bob, so you, in my estimation, I feel privileged that my father showed me your videos so that I was able to get the skills, like he said, that he wasn't able to give me. Your parents, obviously, and your grandmother, very distinguished musicians. So you had kind of all of these tools right around you. So my question is, what about for other young people, for other people, any person who wants to get to know music, like you said? I mean, you have to know so many things, like you said. There are the people in the 70s that they only were talking about reading the music in the musical notation. Then, like you're saying, it's got to be broader. But where are you supposed to start when you need to, when you want to know more about music? It's so multifaceted. How do you recommend people begin then?
Again, I will be forgiven how I'm going to answer that question. The first course I made for the Great Courses is now in a third edition. It's called How to Listen to and Understand Great Music. The third edition was made in 2006. That was a full year course that I taught at the San Francisco Conservatory for sophomores and juniors. And the way I created that course, you know, when you teach at a conservatory, it's very different than teaching in a music department at a university. At a conservatory, your students are performers and composers. They're practitioners. So you have to be able, especially for the performers, when you teach Mozart, you can't teach when he was born and when he died and what brand of toilet paper he used. You've got to give them tools to play his music the way he wanted it played. You've got to give them the historical environment. You've got to give them an understanding of who he was as a composer and the stylistic norms that he was dealing with. They've got to know that composer within his own time and place. So teaching at a conservatory means helping them be better performers. It's ear training. Very different than a historical, straight ahead university kind of teaching. So the course I'm talking about, this How to Listen to and Understand Great Music, basically approaches music from ancient Greece to 1913 that way. How do we hear what composers are doing? How do we understand musical form? And how do we appreciate the stylistic changes from the ancient world to 1913 as a mirror of the larger environment around the composer? So that's a place to start. The other thing to realize, and this is the beauty of life in general, aging sucks, okay? We talked about that before. Your eyes go, you lose your hair, you get fat, your knees, elbows, everything goes. But providing, God bless us, we don't lose our mental acuity, we keep getting smarter. We keep accumulating more and more knowledge. We keep seeing more nuance and getting a deeper understanding of the world around us. This is the good part of aging. And none of us should expect, actually none of us should expect to know everything, because that's not possible. And of course, as we get older, we only become more aware of what we don't know. But none of us should expect to know at the age of 20 or at the age of 25. And maybe at 30 and 35, we really start sensing the greater realities. My point is, only time and life experience really allows us to tap into these pieces of music. You know, I'll give you, I'm babbling on, but you're letting me, so thank you. I used to teach a course on Mahler symphonies at the San Francisco Conservatory to undergraduates, 19, 20-year-olds. Now, excuse me. Mahler symphonies they're not just pieces of music, they're philosophical tracts that track Mahler's spiritual trajectory from the time he was a young man to almost the time he died. He was still a young man, he was just 51 when he died. But these are not just pieces of music, they're about his religious worldviews, they're about his spirituality, they're about his relationship with nature, they're about grief. The Fifth Symphony is just a terrifying piece about grief and loss, of which Mahler had a tremendous amount in his life. How am I supposed to teach that to an undergraduate who's 20, who's never lost anybody, who has no sense of Mahler's motivating desire in creating these symphonies? It's much easier to teach it to an musically ignorant adult who senses this meaning, because this adult has lived enough life to be able to understand through the metaphor and analog in the music. So there you have it. Only life experience often will help inform us of what a piece of music is about. So how do I learn? You start by using the resources that are out there, and then you listen. And I think it's important, as best as you can, to keep educating yourself, because we can never know too much. We can't. I've been told by people in the past, I don't want to know too much because it's going to ruin the mystery of the piece. You know, I'm sorry, about what else would you possibly say that? Would you go to a soccer game not knowing anything about soccer or football in Europe? Because you don't want it to ruin the mystery? Excuse me, the more you know, the more you appreciate. The more you know, the more you notice. The more you notice, the more involved you become. And the more involved you become, the more you understand what a composer is saying directly to you. So you expose yourself not just to music, but you read about it, And when you go to the concerts, if there's a pre-concert talk, go to the pre-concert talk. Add to your intellectual vocabulary as you add to your musical vocabulary. Certainly there's no shortage of information out there now, especially on the web. Some of it's bull, like everything on the web, but there's a lot of good stuff out there too. So enjoy it all.
Dr. Bob, so if I understand correctly, more or less you're saying be curious, start the journey of 1,000 kilometers or whatever that is, 700 miles. Keep going, and so be part of a community, kind of like a book club. Start listening, meet people, talk about it, jump in. Enjoy
the process, the zen of it all. Every time we learn a new piece, we're more complete. We really are. We see more, we hear more, we understand more. You just said it better in 30 seconds than I did in the prior 5 minutes. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Well, Dr. Bob, so how important is it to learn to play an instrument and read music? Because we're taught in the school we're taught about being literate, how important it is in a democracy to be literate, to be able to read and write and to be fluent in that, not just, to be able to write our name, but to be able to write a statement about what we've just read or what we think. How important is musical literacy to be able to go to a piano and open a book and play it?
I want everyone who's listening to know that Simeon and I did not talk about this, and yet he has just thrown, as we say in the United States, he's thrown a fastball right down the middle of my plate. If I had the money, if I was if I were a rich man, I would start, my foundation would be about putting pianos in people's houses and piano teachers next to those pianos. I think if you want to know what's happened, the downfall of music in the West, when I was a kid, I know this sounds like when I was a lad. When I was a lad, everyone took piano lessons. There was a piano lesson in everyone's house. You took band once you got to 4th grade of elementary school. It didn't matter whether you were in public school or private school. You had to pick a musical instrument and you had to play it for a couple of years at least. And you sang in a chorus. Music was participatory. You made it yourself. It didn't matter whether you were an idiot or a genius. You made it yourself. And in doing so, you were a participant. You weren't just a static accoutrement. You weren't just the proverbial couch potato. To me, the greatest disaster to befall Western music, and when everyone is saying, how do we get our audiences back? You got to make people want to participate in the process, physically participate in the process. And I don't know what the future holds because I do rue the loss of musical literacy. It doesn't mean you have to be great. I mean, I can't tell you how many hundreds of adults have told me, I wish I'd kept up with my piano lessons. Yeah, I wish I could pole vault 20 feet. Okay, we all wish we could do lots of things we can't do, but the bottom line is you did it. And it gave you an ear and a sense of involvement. So I think it's huge, huge. We are hardwired to make music. It's something intrinsic to what we are and what we do. And a degree of musical literacy frees the mind and renders us susceptible to divine influence. And God bless us. Again, I rue so much of what's going on in the United States right now, and indeed across the world, with right-wing demagogues becoming empowered in a way that would have been unimaginable 20 years ago. Yes, we need to be able to think for ourselves a little better than we seem to be thinking for ourselves right now. And this to me is a function of a free education where we read, where we listen, where we are aware of greater and better things beyond the material value of the everyday. And music's a very important, I would say, vital part of that.
So Dr. Bob, to come up in connection with our former question about someone who wants to get to know music, they should jump in the pool. It would be also important then that they learn how to read music, that they start to play, just like you said about European football or American soccer, that they take part, like you said, in the conversation.
I'm a huge believer. Again, I'm always being asked, is it too late? Is it too late for me to take a musical instrument? I always say, no, 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 no. Well, I'm such a dork, I'm tone deaf. Who cares? Who cares? One of the things about my generation, the boomers, we're living a long time. People are retiring. I mean, I'll never retire because I'm self-employed, but my baby brother is going to be 65 next year, and he's going to retire. And this guy's going to live another 30 years. There's no doubt about it. What are you going to do with 30 years, Steve? Excuse me. There's always time. Adults can always pick up an instrument. The problem with adult learners is we have an expanded view of what we're going to accomplish. I tell people, just find a good teacher, key number one. Key number two, buy a real piano if you're going to play piano. Don't get a Casio. Excuse me. A Casio is to a piano what a real living human being is to a blow-up doll. You don't want to go there. Find a good teacher and enjoy the zen. Enjoy the process. Know that you'll be better, and you're better this month than you were last month. That's all you need to know. Don't put super expanded expectations on yourself. But you can always learn, and it's a wonderful thing. It's a marvelous thing to be able to make even the simplest music. It's so completing, it's so exciting, and so centering. I couldn't recommend it enough.
So, Dr. Bob, so tell us, because during this wonderful conversation, I keep thinking back to those lovely photos you showed us, and what were in those lovely photos, except of the beautiful one of your grandmother, the portrait of your grandmother, there are two people sitting at a piano, mm-hmm. playing music. This is like your household. That gives me, that one picture tells a million words. So that's what you would recommend, actually. That's what we want happening. That's what that culture. We want that. We would want that in somebody's household, and that would be music.
If I had, like I said, if I could start a foundation, so many pianos are being thrown out now, mid-20th, not the big early 20th century instruments, but the mid-20th century pianos, which are perfectly good. They're being trashed. They're being junked by the tens of thousands because no one wants them. Everyone wants, if they want to have something, a little electric keyboard, you can stick it in the corner, you can put on earphones. We don't have to listen to junior practice. What message does that send? Okay, you have to take piano lessons, but I don't want to hear you practice. Yes, a chicken in every pot, a car in every driveway, a piano in every living room. I'll tell you an experience we had. We have friends that have a house up in Lake Tahoe in the Sierra Mountains, not far from here. And every other year we're invited up there for a week. And they've got this big old upright from the turn of the 20th century there. And the house has computers and all the other stuff. And usually there's a whole bunch of families visiting because it's a big house. Where do all the kids congregate? They're all banging on the piano because it's a physical thing, right? You push the lever down, it sends a hammer up, it smacks a string. You actually have immediate, instant gratification. Physical gratification through a mechanical device that becomes almost human. Up there, the kids didn't play with the computers. They just beat the crap out of the piano. And, it was a really important lesson the first time I saw that if you have the instrument around, they're going to gravitate towards it because it's fun making noise. Sure. And I always tell people, when should I start my kid on piano? Not too early, 7, 8, but buy the piano now and stick it in the back room. And let them beat the crap out of it for the next 4 years and get it tuned every 6 months. Let them make friends with the instrument so that when they start getting lessons, it's not a form of discipline. It's actually, oh, this is cool. This is what I can do with it.
It's lovely. Dr. Bob, so I'm very sad to say we are running out of time. I want to in a second play your latest composition for latest chamber music for piano, but I want to ask you, what do you think your grandmother would think about us speaking today, about this long, very fruitful career you've had?
I think she'd be thrilled, except for the piece of music you're about to play.
Let's hear it. I'm sorry, I think we were supposed to hear a little bit more of that.
Yeah, that cut off. Bummer.
Lovely, lovely, lovely. So, good. We might have time for one question if anyone wants to speak up. We have Dr. Bob here. Write us a chat or just turn on your microphone, say something. For now, we'll keep going on. So, Dr. Bob, you've convinced
May
me.
I explain why my grandmother would be unhappy with that movement?
Please.
That was a takeoff on a set of exercises by someone named Charles Hannon, who wrote The Virtuoso Pianist in the 1870s. And my grandmother believed in those exercises beyond God, beyond patriotism, beyond planet. This was her Bible. And I had to play those damned Hannon exercises over and over again, just like every other piano player from the 1870s to the present day. So that's my little revenge. That was part of a piece of music called Exercised, where each movement is a takeoff on an etude or a study. And she would have been unhappy with my disrespectful attitude towards the Hannon exercises in that movement. Those exercises, by the way, according to Rachmaninoff, were the very basis of Russian pianism as it evolved in the late 19th century. But to me, it was just the basis of self-loathing.
Well, I really like it a lot.
Thank you.
So,
Thank you.
Dr. Bob, so you've convinced all of us, I'd like to join your community. I'd like to become part of this. How can we stay in touch with you?
Well, there's my website, which is just robertgreenbergmusic.com. You can listen to all of my compositions there. If you want to buy my scores, you can. It's got a lot of my blogs on it. And then there's, and then there's Patreon, which is my subscription site, patreon.com/robertgreenbergmusic, where I blog and vlog and put up my music and do all kinds of stuff 5 to 6 times a week. This is how I'm spending my quarantine, is on Patreon. And I can't encourage folks too much to go there. Yeah, it'll cost you a couple of bucks maybe, per month, but it's worth it. On Monday, I posted a big piece about singers. On Tuesday, I posted a big piece about Ella Fitzgerald. The anniversary of her death was on Monday. Today, I posted another piece on Ella Fitzgerald. Tomorrow, I'm going to be posting a piece on birth houses of composers. Just a lot of stuff. On Saturday, I'm posting a piece about Schubert's Winterreise. Every now and then I'll put up something about my house, about my kids, about trying to acquire toilet paper, about the joys of finally getting a haircut last week, all sorts of things. So anyway, this is my great pleasure right now, and I hope folks will join me.
That's lovely.
Patreon.com.
So we see there, so there are fans, buds, super buds, right there.
Yeah, it depends. It depends how much loose change you want to throw my way at the end of every month. But just join me. Just like I say, we buy magazines, we buy newspapers. They cost a heck of a lot more than $2 a month.
Okay, so this is great. So then if I want to become a fan, I just click on join, and then I'm part of this. I'm part of your community. I get daily updates. I get to stay in the loop about all this stuff, and
you get to comment on everything I say or do, and I read everything and respond to 90% of it. So it's very interactive. It's very interactive.
So that's great for people like me in upstate when I lived in upstate New York, so that I've got this access to world-class professor, double PhD.
Well, so I would think. So I would say, right.
Lovely. Well, okay. So and then, like you said, it's so people can reach out to you. Questions, and every now and then I'll write a piece. I mentioned a composer, a fantastic composer named Georgi Ligeti in one of my posts, and someone asked me a question. What is this micro polyphony they talk about with Ligeti? So I wrote a 1,200 word post on Ligeti and micro polyphony. I thought that's a good question, and I'm sure a bunch of you would be interested to hear the answer. So I also write posts based on the feedback I get from my patrons. Okay, that's lovely. Well, I look forward to signing up then. So
good.
Next week we have coming up Aya Shina, Listening to Water. Aya is living in northern Japan. Her grandmother was a tea ceremony master, and that's how she learned about water, which has influenced her as a composer. She's made several soundscapes in different museums in the United States, and water has always kind of been at the center of her being as a composer. So please do join us next week, next Wednesday. We look forward to seeing you there. The link is being placed in the chat right now. You can just click there, get the invitation. There it is, facebook.com/events. So unfortunately, we have to say goodbye, or should I say bad bye, to Dr. Bob for now. We look forward to our next conversation. Thank you so much, Dr. Bob, for sharing all of these beautiful moments and lovely, intimate portrait of you, of your family, of the work you do. We are just so privileged to be able to speak with you tonight.
Thank you so much. It was a great pleasure.
We look forward to another time, to having you back and to listening to more of your piano forehand etudes. So thanks to Dr. Bob. Thanks to our production team who worked tirelessly to make all of these things happen, make us look very good and sound good. Thanks very much to our generous sponsors, the Student Hotel Vienna and of course to you, the participants, without whom our conversation just wouldn't be worth it. It's sharing with every one of you here tonight. It just, that's what it's all about. So thank you very much. So from Oakland, California, from Vienna, Austria, then we have to say goodbye and see you next week.
Bye-bye.